This live presentation was produced in Ashland, Oregon by the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library and Event Center. Our VML relies on the support of our volunteers, members, and donors to organize and present these programs. For more information about this presentation, or to borrow, download, or purchase other recordings from our catalog, please visit our website at rvml.org.
As just mentioned, my name is Fred Burks, and I'd like us to start just with a moment of silence and a few deep breaths. And whenever I'm connecting in a deep and important way, I really like to take the time to call in the sacred energies to support us. And what I'd like to call in is all the spirits, all that is Great Spirit, to be here supporting me and supporting all of us and opening up to whatever is best for each person here, for each person listening, for me, and for all beings in the universe. And I ask and open for any guidance in that direction. And what I'm finding in my life is that breath is vitally important. And in fact, whenever I'm having challenges up, or whenever emotional things come up, I find that if I can just stop and take a few deep breaths, it's amazing how it shifts the energy. And so I'm having a lot of fun developing different tools that work in my life and learning other people's tools and putting them all together in a wonderful spiritual toolbox that I can use and I can help to spread so that we can all use to transform ourselves and to transform the planet. And I'd like to just share one simple one, just for starters, before I even start introducing myself. And it comes from the Web of Love website at weboflove.org, is one of the websites that is under the nonprofit organization of which I'm the executive director. And the nonprofit is called PEERS, Public Education and Empowerment Resource Service. And that's just a page that then refers you to all of the websites we manage. And the website on that is peerservice.org, peerservice.org. So the Web of Love exercise, basically, it introduced us to the concept, which many of you here know, that we're all interconnected, that every person in the world has a heart, and that every heart has a place within that just wants to love and be loved, and that we're all connected. And when we remember this connection, and when we breathe this connection, we strengthen not only ourselves and our own hearts and beings, but we strengthen and nurture the entire collective consciousness of the planet. So I just want to share with you one very simple exercise that I have found very profound in my own life. And it starts like this. On the in-breath, which is you take a full, deep in-breath, your sacred love flows into me. And on the out-breath, my sacred love flows out to you. And an easy way to start this, in fact, I invite you to try this right now, is think of who's the one who you feel the closest, tightest bond in your life with right now. Who's the one that you feel the love so fully and easily with? I invite you to close your eyes and think of that person right now. And then just imagine that person, and taking a deep breath in, just say, your sacred love flows into me. And on the out-breath, my sacred love flows out to you. So that's a good way to prime the pump. You start with somebody you feel that love with already. And then you can start spreading out. Think of maybe a community that you're involved in or a group of people that you're involved in. And think of that whole group and how they support you and love you. And then you can breathe that in, that you can become plural. Your sacred love flows into me. My sacred love flows out to you. And then you can expand further outwards. You can expand to all of the people in your life. Let's do that. Just think of all the people you're connected with in your life, even the ones you have some problems with. You know, they have hearts too. And in some way, they're doing the best they can with what they got. You know, we're all in some way doing the best we can with what we got. And so open to everybody you know in your life and breathe in their sacred love. Take a moment, full deep breath. Your sacred love flows into me. My sacred love flows out to you. And then we can take it a step further to the collective consciousness of all humanity. All human beings on this planet. Everyone has a heart. We're all interconnected. Let's just feel that web of love around the planet and breathe it in. Your sacred love flows into me on the in-breath. My sacred love flows out to you. And one last final step now, then we take it out past humanity to all beings, all existence. My favorite term for the divine is all that is. So imagining all that is, imagining all beings. And again, breathing in, your sacred love flows into me. My sacred love flows out to you. Thank you. So, I know some of you are indulging me. Some of you are more interested in my research into the major cover-ups going on and all of that. And others here are interested in the sort of mystical underpinnings of everything that's going on, which is actually my favorite thing, and I will be talking about that a lot tonight. Just so you know, the overall plan of what I plan to talk about is talk about some of both of those in the first hour, and then I'm going to have a 15-minute presentation that's an extremely inspiring video clip that I want to share with you. And then I want to have as much time as possible for questions, because I know all of you are brilliant people who are researching this stuff, you know, whether it's the more metaphysical aspect or the cover-ups or both. And as someone who's dedicated himself full-time to this work, and I happen to have a pretty good network of informants, I'm happy to share what I've learned and give whatever knowledge I have, and also speculation. And I think it's really important to distinguish between things that I have really solid, reliable, verifiable backing for, and I can even tell you the sources, which I would call closer to fact, but who knows really what is fact and what is fiction, and that which is speculation, which is based upon all of the solid information I've got. What do I really think might be going on in the big picture? So let me first just give a brief introduction to who I am. I grew up with a father who's a Methodist minister and a conspiracy theorist. So you think, oh, that's where he gets some of this stuff. But guess what? When you have a father who's a minister, there's something called PK syndrome. It's called preacher's kid syndrome. It's like your dad's preaching up on the pulpit about how we should all be, and everybody looks up to him and respects to him. And you see at home what he's like, you know, when he gets out the belt, you know, and leaves a little bruise with the belt on my butt. So how do you think that feels? A PK syndrome is like you basically reject your father and his whole thing, including his conspiracy theories. And he was my big nemesis for a long time. I eventually had a breakthrough with him at age 27, and now we're great friends, and he's one of my biggest supporters. But for a long time, he was my nemesis. And he was always telling me from the time I was 10 years old. I remember I was born in 58, so in 1968, Nixon was, of course, running for presidency. My dad said, if Nixon is elected, there's going to be a World War III, and we're all dead. He said, we'll be dead within 10, 15 years at the most. And so here I'm a little 10-year-old, and at that time I'm tending to believe my dad, right? Because Dad knows all this stuff. I don't know this stuff. So what happens, Nixon comes into office, and eventually he's impeached. And so it's like, well, Dad was wrong about that. And so basically, my dad to this day still believes in 10 to 15 years the world's going to implode or be destroyed or the economic collapse or whatever. And yet, the funny thing is, my dad is a pretty optimistic person. I really do appreciate that about him. So he's personal, in his personal life, he's very kind of exuberant and optimistic, but he also believes we're going to destroy ourselves. Oh, I'm sorry, I got to watch that. So that's what I grew up with, and he did not present any reliable evidence. He was into the Christic Institute, and I remember him mentioning Danny Sheehan and the Christic Institute, but of course, maybe I was too young, but he just did not present it in the way that it all attracted me into listening to it. So I grew up, I got older, I was actually agnostic. I didn't even know if there was a God or not. Then when I was 19, I got into kind of an emotional, spiritual crisis. And for the first time, I said, God, if you're there, show yourself to me. I put my arrogance aside, and arrogance is my biggest challenge, my core challenge in my life. And said, okay, in the past I'd said, if he's there, I'm going to find him. So I said, show yourself to me. And within a month or two, I got the book Life After Life by Raymond Moody when I was 19. And what it describes is all these experiences of people who have been declared clinically dead for varying periods of time, some of them for hours, but then somehow revived or resuscitated. And Dr. Moody went around and interviewed all these people and found these amazing similarities. I'm just curious, how many people here know about near-death experiences or have read about that? Okay, most of you. So you know about going into the tunnel and seeing this being of light, and often if they're Christian, they see Christ. If they're Buddhist, they might see Buddha or whatever. But the point being that this information instantly convinced me that life was not just this third-dimensional reality, and that started me on a really clear spiritual path. And yet the funny thing is, I didn't yet know what I was supposed to do in this life, but I just kept doing what felt like the right thing. And the wonderful guiding principle I've had for pretty much my whole life is what I called in the beginning: what's best for all of us. It's not about being in service to others all the time, because sometimes serving myself is just as important as serving others, but really what's best for all of us. And in fact, I was deeply involved when I was, about 18 with a group of born-again Christians who are really great. They were not Bible thumpers. Awesome, wonderful people who were really about love, unconditional love that Christ talked about. And that was a very powerful and opening experience for me. And I'm forgetting where I was going with that. But anyway, so I've had a number of experiences that opened me to the deeper levels of connection. And I went off to Indonesia and China, lived in Indonesia for a year with a Muslim family, 20 people under one roof, which was a fascinating experience. And they were a paragon of wonderful, pious Muslims. They were, again, not your Koran-thumping terrorists that, of course, that's the image out in the media. They were really wonderful people, and my adopted mother that I lived with was a saint. Everybody just loved her, and just wonderful, giving heart. And during that time, I read the Koran twice, and I got what, I think all of the major religions have very wonderful, powerful teachings. Gandhi says something to the effect of, at the heart of every religion, it's all the same. Think of that, at the heart of every religion, it's all the same. And yet so many of these religions then build up walls and edifices that block us off from each other. But if you go into the heart, that's where the core is. So I went on life, went off there, came back, and through some really unusual kind of fun circumstances, eventually began working as an interpreter with the State Department. Am I doing something? Or? Anyway, okay. So, I started off as an Indonesian interpreter and eventually did Chinese. I lived in China and did Mandarin interpreting for 5 years, but Mandarin is really hard to keep up on. I decided there's plenty of work in Indonesian, so I just focused on the Indonesian, eventually dropped the Chinese. And the funny thing is, my very first assignment when I was, 28 years old, I worked with this program called the International Visitor Program, where we took influential people who were given government grants on 1-month study tours of the United States. So basically the embassies in each country, and this program exists in most countries, they would choose the people who they thought were relatively young, in their 30s and 40s, and who were going to be very influential. And they gave them a 1-month grant to come over and study whatever they wanted in the United States. And so they'd travel to 5, 6, 7 cities and towns to really get a flavor for what's the United States like and to develop collaboration with those folks. So it was really fun. It was like I got to have an education during my work traveling with these wonderful people, really very smart, fun people in general, traveling around and learning all these things. And I learned about how our media works because I took around a lot of journalists, got to go behind the scenes and meet some of the, even some famous anchors and stuff like that. Got to learn about the legal system when I took around some legal professors. And I got to learn about all these different aspects of life in 1-month chunks. It was like the best education you could ever want, and I got paid for it. I always told people, God, I would do this job for free. Not full time, of course, but, so it's like. So anyway, I felt incredibly lucky and blessed. And what I was going to say is on the very first assignment, I realized I really have a good knack for languages. I didn't get it until then. It's like by the end of that assignment, I was literally whispering into my guest's ear. A lot of times it was only one individual. Sometimes it was a small group. And so I was whispering simultaneously. So as our speaker was speaking, or the person we're meeting with, I would just translate it so he wouldn't have to stop. I mean, you've all seen simultaneous interpreting. And I was doing that in my first month. It's like, wow, I have a good knack for this. And I thought, if I really work on it, I'll bet eventually I could move up the ranks and maybe even, who knows, get up into the White House eventually. But at the time I said, you know what? No, I'm on a spiritual path. Ever since I was 19, I've been very clear, my focus is in spiritual transformation. And so I decided not to do that. But of course, Spirit, or all that is, or God, whatever you want to call it, had different plans. And so what happened after I had been doing that, basically the State Department has 3 levels of interpreter. After I had been doing that at the low level for 9 years, I was doing backup interpreting for some simultaneous interpreters at a conference. So even though I was doing simultaneous interpreting, I'd never gotten qualified and just didn't think it was worth it. But I was doing backup interpreter, and on the first day I was out doing errands. The backup interpreter does a lot of errands. And I came back, and this conference had been going for 3 hours, and one of the interpreters came up and grabbed me. The other one was gone. He said, Fred, can you do any simultaneous? And I said, well, yeah, I kind of know how to do simultaneous. Please, 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 because he's been going for 3 hours on his own, which is, in simultaneous, it takes incredible focus. Because you can imagine, they're talking, and you've got to, at the same instant, interpret everything they're saying. So it's different than consecutive, which is one at a time, where you can rest, and you're not talking all the time. With simultaneous, you never stop talking, both sides. So this guy was having to do that for 3 hours, and he was like, frantic, please come help me. So I sat in, and because I'd had experience, I did great. And my boss found out about it, at the State Department. He said, well, come in and take the test. So I said, sure, why not? And I passed pretty easily, and that got me up to the 2nd level. And then a couple years later, I got a phone call one afternoon. I think it was, and he said, was it the next day or 2 days later? He said, can you be in Copenhagen a couple days to interpret for Al Gore at this UN conference? And I'm like, well, sure, I'm not qualified for it, but sure, why not? It turns out because Indonesian is, even though it's a relatively easy language, it uses the same alphabet as ours, there's no tenses, it's a pretty easy language to learn. There are very few Americans or people living in the United States who are really fluent in Indonesian. In fact, at that time, there was really only one person who was qualified at the top level, and he was unavailable, and they knew I was good, and he actually recommended me because I had worked with him. So they called me in to work for Gore, and then, of course, after that, they said, well, come take the test to be at the top level. And so I didn't even have to take the test. If a few people vouch for you, you can just get it, and they vouched very highly for me. So I got it without even asking. I got moved right up into the top levels. And a couple years later, I actually became the State Department's top Indonesian interpreter. And so that's how I got into the White House. Now, that's the outside picture. What's the inside picture? Why spiritually did I get into the White House? And of course, it's because what I'm here for is to support what's best for all beings. And from early on, though I clearly do not like Bush's policies or didn't like Nixon's policies or whatever, I still understand that these are people who have hearts who, for whatever reasons, have gotten, in my minds, twisted when they're growing up. I mean, imagine your daddy's Poppy Bush. What's it like growing up in that family, right? And as you go up the power ranks and up the hierarchy, it's harder and harder to resist all the pressures. And so I would venture to say that most of us here, including myself, if we had been pushed into the whole politician thing, we would not be as clear spiritually and emotionally as we are. There's tremendous pressures. And having seen it personally when I've been working with the president, you wouldn't believe the kind of stuff that they have to do. So I knew that the reason I was in the White House and the reason I was interpreting at the top level is because I could hold that space for these people who are under so much pressure to actually call in spirit, to call in God, Christ consciousness, whatever you call that energy, into those spaces. And I felt it was a huge privilege and an honor. And now at the highest level, I should tell you, we very rarely do simultaneous. There's all of this fancy protocol when they're at the top level, and it's always set up. There's one chair here, there's one chair here, the advisors sit here, and the advisors sit here. The interpreter sits back here, so like if George Bush is sitting here, I sit right at his elbow. And then the Indonesian president or whoever is sitting there has an interpreter sitting at that elbow. And because it's consecutive, not simultaneous, and I only interpret when Bush speaks, I don't have to talk a lot of times. So when I was interpreting, of course, I'd be focused on doing that, but then when the other side was going, I would literally be opening up and calling in support and spiritual guidance right into that room for all these people. And I knew that's why I had moved up the ranks so easily. That's what I'm being called to do in this life. And so it was very exciting for me. At first, this is a little bit funny. As I said, arrogance. When I was a kid, I used to think, I was better than everybody. And I've met other people. I used to feel a little bit guilty. I found, guess what? A bunch of people have arrogance as a thing, And so now I'm very comfortable talking about it. But at the same time, I'm what you call an overcompensator. I'm not one who wants to show you that I'm arrogant. I just need to know it for myself. And basically, long story short, I got beaten down severely when I was very young for showing up and, in this arrogant state. So it's like I learned to hide my arrogance. But I became fiercely competitive if somebody was better than me in anything. But I then worked on it a lot. And as I said, as an overcompensator, you don't want people to know you're arrogant because you fear, you're going to get crucified in some way. And so when I became interpreter for the president, I actually didn't even tell anybody. I didn't even tell my own mom for a while because I remembered actually when my boss told me he had interpreted for Nixon, I immediately put him up on a pedestal. I was like, wow, you interpreted for Nixon in China? I mean, that to me was like, whew. And I didn't want people to do that to me. And so for that reason, for several years, I didn't tell anybody I was actually interpreting for the president. But then finally, I think it was my 40th birthday party, I said, you know what? This is stupid. I said, if it was me and it was my friend, yeah, I might have a tendency to put him up a little, but I want to know this stuff. Tell me what's happening there, and let's talk about it. And so I decided on my 40th birthday, I called my parents, came, and all my close friends, and I finally kind of spilled the beans. And another funny little coincidence, on that day of my 40th birthday, I get a call from the State Department. Oh, can you interpret for the president today on the phone? Which was really funny, and I had to make a choice. And I told him, I said, it's my 40th birthday party, and this is really important. And if it's before this time, I'm willing to do it. But if it's after this time, there was somebody else available, so please use the other person. And long story short, it did not happen that day. But I had done it just a week before, too. And just so you know, I haven't done a lot. They don't need Indonesian interpreters for the president very often. So I was only in person with Clinton in the White House once, with Clinton on the phone once, which was really interesting. Then with Bush several times, once in Bali, once in the White House, once in New York at the UN, and on the phone several times. So not even 10 times total did I actually work with the president. But it was enough. I also worked with top generals. I worked with, top people, like Colin Powell, Madeleine Albright, with a trip with her in Indonesia. So I was in quite a few secret and top secret meetings. So that's how I got into all of that. And now, as I said, I rebelled against conspiracy theories, and when I was in these meetings, I didn't see any evidence of conspiracy. My dad was a conspiracy theorist. I had some friends who were conspiracy theorists. And literally, just like those of you who know about these cover-ups, you know that sometimes you get written off as being kind of crazy. And I was one of those. I was a debunker. In fact, the house I live in now, where I've lived 7 years, when I first moved there, I didn't know anything about the major cover-ups. And one of my housemates is a conspiracy theorist. And I would just tell him, Declan, you don't know. I've been there in the top secret meetings. I've never seen any evidence of this. And so he'd try to be telling me things like, no, Declan, I'm sorry. I've been there. Just imagine, though, you've been in these top secret meetings and haven't seen any of that. So then what happened is really pretty funny. As I said, I've been on a deep spiritual path my whole life. I want to transform myself and invite everybody around me to transform, to become more loving, more connected, and create a new paradigm on the planet. I have been that my whole life. But I used to work more on the individual level. So that all changed 6 weeks before 9/11, when a wonderful spiritual friend sent me a video. He mailed it to me. He lived in North Carolina, and I was out in Berkeley, California. He said, Fred, you've got to watch this video. It changed my life. And because I respected him and it changed his life, I said, all right. So a lot of you here know about the Disclosure Project and the National Press Club video. At the National Press Club, 22 top government and military witnesses at the most prestigious press club in Washington, D.C., and one of the most in the whole country, with ABC, NBC, all the international news organizations there covering these 22 top-level people, the kind of people I had worked with and totally trusted, saying that there was a huge UFO cover-up going on. And so it was a 2-hour video that I watched in my home. It was not at the time it happened. It was 6 weeks before 9/11. By the time the video is over, my jaw is on the floor. I mean, literally, oh my God, the world is not what I thought it is. Literally, it was like within 2 hours, I had to completely, whoa. And so that put me on a quest. I said, if this is being covered up, what else is being covered up? And at the time, I was still working by then, interpreting requires you to be on the road. When I was doing it full time, 8 months out of the year. It's pretty tough on your relationship life, family, and taking any classes or anything like that. So I only did full-time interpreting for about 5 years. And then I went part-time interpreting and became a part-time nurse, which I really enjoyed doing too. And the cool thing is nursing has a lot of flexibility, and I would always tell my bosses, I might get called off even tomorrow, but as a nurse, there's always backup nurses. So if I got called off the next day to go interpret for whoever, and my bosses were usually pretty okay with it. So it was a good combination. So when I saw this video, it changed my life, and I started reading all of this Disclosure Project material. But it wasn't until the next year when Stephen Greer, this is amazing doctor, MD, was former head of an emergency room, came out to San Francisco to talk. And when I heard him talk, I was really deeply impressed. Just brilliant man. Came across as very humble. I found out later that was not true when I went to work with him for a couple weeks. But he's brilliant, and he has now over 400 witnesses, top government and military. He doesn't take he won't take most of the people in this room, because you've got to have some either military experience or some high-level government or very high-level industry before he'll take you as a witness. He's got over 400 of these people with amazing stories of their personal involvement with the UFO cover-up. And so I was so impressed when he talked. I went up and talked with him afterwards, and then I don't even remember how it happened, but I found out, maybe I looked on his website, he was looking for a personal assistant. And I thought, wow, because this is so important, I actually started emailing me, email back and forth, and he said, well, you got to have these qualifications. You got to be used to working with, top-level people, and you got to be sharp, and you got to know kind of what's going on in the world, and I got all that. So he was kind of excited. I was kind of excited. I flew back to his home and had dinner. The first night, had dinner at his home, and he basically let me know that he has the same core challenge that I do. And he did not hide it in the least. And I was really appreciative, believe it or not. He's such a great man. I don't want to talk any bad about him, but just understand that for various reasons, though I stayed and worked in his office there for 2 weeks, it was not the right thing for me to become his personal assistant. And so what I am extremely thankful is he is the one who then said, go to From the Wilderness website and read Mike Rupert's material on 9/11. And I'd already know 9/11, because 6 weeks before 9/11, remember, I had my eyes opened. When 9/11 happened and the plane went into the Pentagon, I immediately knew this could not be, because I had been with top generals who bragged how any plane that gets lost anywhere in the United States will have a plane up on them in 10 minutes. And you're telling me that the most protected airspace in the entire country, which is the Pentagon, no planes ever fly over the Pentagon, or the White House for that matter, without being intercepted very quickly. And you're telling me an hour after the first plane is lost, and 45 minutes after planes have crashed, not 45, 30 minutes, whatever, after planes have crashed into the World Trade Centers, that this plane can actually break through restricted airspace and crash into the Pentagon? I turned to my girlfriend and said, this has to be a setup. There's no way in the world that they had to have allowed it. So at the time I said either it was allowed to happen or somehow facilitated. So I immediately knew 9/11 was a cover-up, but I didn't know all the details. And Stephen Greer, then this is several months later when I was out at his place in Virginia, he said, you need to go look at Mike Rupert's website. And Mike Rupert had this 9/11 timeline. And that was a great eye-opener. He said, you got to read the book Into the Buzzsaw. Best book out there on the media cover-up. And by the way, if you go to wanttoknow.info, which is the website that I manage about all the cover-ups, and go to the media cover-up, you see at the top, we list all the cover-ups that we worked on. Go into the media and go to the summaries. You'll see a summary of Into the Buzzsaw that is really excellent. And you can learn kind of what's going on in the media and how it's being covered up. So basically, Stephen Greer opened me up to all of these cover-ups, and then I took it even further, because as you know, Dr. Greer is mostly interested in the UFO cover-up. He knows a lot about the other ones, but that's his main focus. And at the time I said, I hope somebody out there is doing a good job of using reliable, verifiable information to present all of these cover-ups for people who are intelligent and intellectual, who have an open mind to actually learn what's really going on. And I kind of went online and searched all over, scoured the internet. Is anybody doing this? Knowing that if nobody else was doing it, I was going to have to do it. And sure enough, I couldn't find anybody doing it. And so that's what got me started on doing the wanttoknow.info website. And since then, just for curiosity, how many of you have been to the wanttoknow.info website? Okay, almost half. Okay. But if you go there, the specialty on that website, which is, the focus is cover-up, it's not about metaphysics or mysticism or anything like that. It does give a framework. It's very optimistic because I know, it's not this I believe, I know we can and will transform this whole thing. And that's the attitude that you will read on wanttoknow.info. So it's got very deep material. In fact, it's got some really disturbing information, particularly on mind control, which has become my field of greatest expertise as far as the cover-ups go. And if you read that information, it'll shake you if you're not aware of it. It's got some deep, weird, twisted stuff. But it's all based on government documents. We now have over 20,000 pages of government documents on the mind control programs. And we tell you exactly how you can order those documents using the Freedom of Information Act. Everything I've up there, I've ordered it myself to make sure this is exactly what it says. We've also got people have these documents loaded up on websites, so you can go on links. You don't have to buy the documents for $30. It's only $30 to buy 3 CDs from the government with those 20,000 pages of documents. But we've also got that up there. So that's what got me started on this whole thing. And as you know, I'm a very deeply spiritual person. It was really important for me to get the greater perspective. What are we doing here? How is our collective consciousness manifesting all of this that's happening. And I knew once I got, well, even while I was doing Want to Know.info, I had to start working that aspect. And so at the same time I was developing Want to Know.info, we also developed weboflove.org, which is that breathing exercise we just did. Now, interestingly enough, surprise, surprise, that website is not nearly as popular as Want to Know.info. You know, Want to Know.info gets now about 2,500 visits a day, whereas Web of Love gets about 200 visits a day. But, you know, still 200 visits a day for a website is not bad, and I'm thrilled that many people go and look. And it only touches on the cover-ups on Web of Love. And Want to Know.info does have an inspiration section, and we put there, you know, don't just read the cover-up material. Particularly if you start to get overwhelmed, go read some of our inspirational stuff. It's amazing. And so I've really been working two sides of the fence here. One is, let's transform, and I know a lot of people don't want to look at the cover-ups. So here's some websites. In fact, we've got others. We've got momentoflove.org and Global Community for All that are for people who don't really want to look at the cover-ups too much, but they're very much into spiritual transformation. And then we've got wanttoknow.info, which has thousands, literally now thousands of pages of excellent material for the other end. So I don't want to go on too long. What I want to do right now is show this 15-minute video clip that shows you some of the most inspirational material out there. And what this is, you're going to see a group called Challenge Day. Anybody here know about Challenge Day? Only about 2 people, looks like, in the whole audience, maybe 3. Challenge Day is a group that goes into high schools, and there's a male and female facilitator. They get 1 day off, about 100 students, and in 1 day, they can take these students and transform their lives. You're going to see it. Basically, what they do is they show them that we're all human. And they show them how we're all hurting ourselves and why are we doing this in a way that's unbelievable. By the end of the day, it's a normal thing for rival gang members to be hugging each other and saying, I'm sorry. Can you imagine that? Rival gang members, sometimes with tears in their eyes. It's unbelievable. I think it is the most transformative program for high school students on the planet. And so I just wanted to share it with you so you can just see some of the things that are going on the planet to counterbalance some of the other craziness. And I think it's really important for us to not neglect this. So why don't we take a moment now and... Okay, why don't we get started again? So we have about 40 minutes left, and I wanted to give a decent amount of time to questions. So I'm going to try to do in about 10 minutes just to give you my own metaphysical framework of how I put this all together, and you can see how much it resonates with you. Basically, I'm paying a lot of attention these days to what I call the collective consciousness of the planet. We talked about how we're all interconnected. Well, if you take all of the collective energies of our beings, of our body, mind, spirit, and put it together, I believe that is what creates the consensus reality that we live in. And that is what we interact with. And the collective consciousness is evolving as it has over many millennia. 1,000 years ago, when you had wars, you had walls around your city, and you put the victims' heads on the spikes on the walls. It was pretty barbaric. So you want to say, how it's worse now than it's ever been before. Go read your history of what it was like 1,000 years ago, and sometimes even 100, 200 years ago. So the collective consciousness is evolving. But then the key piece, and the piece that the quote-unquote powers that be don't want you to know, is how powerful you as an individual are. Because it's how you interface with the collective consciousness that does make all the difference in the world. See, each one of us interprets everything that happens to us. Right? There's the fact of what happens. The sound is having problems. What do I do with that? Well, it's those powers that be, and I'm a powerful light being, and so they're coming in and sending rays and trying to cut off this thing. It's like, I'm choosing to see the world from a place of fear and paranoia. Now, some of that stuff does happen. I don't want to be belittling it, but in this case, I really think it was just, we've got a little mechanical problem. Right, so The point being that everything that happens to you, you choose how you interpret it. And when you choose to move from a place of, I want to support and empower myself and everyone to be the best that we can be in every moment, guess what? You start transforming your life. And I would suggest that just probably everyone in here does that to some degree. But what I want to be is an invitation for all of us to get clear that every moment we are interpreting life, we are seeing something happen that is as a result of our interaction with the collective consciousness, and then we get to decide what we do with it. Now, if you sit there and say, well, Cheney is evil and manipulating, and he was behind 9/11 and mind control and all this sort of stuff, there may be, I believe there is some real truth to that. But how are you saying it? Are you saying it from he's evil and we've got to stop him and he's a bad person? When you're doing that, what's happening? What are you creating? Polarization. And in a way, the more polarization you're creating, the more space you're creating for war, dissent, and all sorts of crazy things going on. So I would suggest that we are here playing the polarization game. And it's like, how are we going to play that? Are you going to be a light worker fighting with your saber and killing the dark ones? Isn't that funny? Or you can be one of the dark ones over here, manipulating all this. Or are we going to say, hey, wait a minute. Just like we saw in this 15-minute film. And by the way, you can get the 90-minute version of it on challengeday.org. It's well worth it to buy the whole thing. It's amazing. So by choosing each of us to then own our power, because in our essence, every one of us is a manifestation of the divine and has access to infinite energy, to infinite possibility. We're afraid to open to it. For a long time, I was afraid to stand up here like this and just be who I am and be that manifestation of the divine, because I was afraid, as I said, I would get somehow crucified or put up on a pedestal. And I don't want either of those. But I've been doing my work, and I've been getting more and more comfortable and realize, if I just expand my awareness and expand my energy without wanting to make you any better or less than me, but wanting to hold the space for everyone I meet to step up and let's play, let's dance, let's play big, then I can inspire everyone around me. And then guess what? My life is getting better all the time. I can tell you, just this week I'm off doing a summer camp, and there's just the most amazing people out there I'm getting to play and dance with. So I'm attracting those people. And sort of the ripples from my consciousness affect these people, and they ripple out, and their ripples affect me. And pretty soon we've got waves going around the planet that are all about transformation. Now, my conspiracy theorist friends who are really kind of locked in that paradigm say they've got HAARP and all of these electric ray guns and all this sort of stuff, and they do, and they are sending out waves of disempowering energy. So both are happening at the same time. And it seems that the collective consciousness, as I said, is wanting to play the polarization game. And so if you push it really wide apart, guess what has to happen eventually? Some big change. You've got to, the thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, if you want to call it that, old Hegelian stuff. But the question is, when we get this, is it going to be an Armageddon that brings us together and finally a small survivors try to recreate something out of the ashes? Or is it going to be a little bit more gentle and gradual where we can all have this, do it all together and stop playing the blame game? So the big picture for me is, yes, there's some really deep, dark, scary things going on. But we get to have choice in how we take it. And if each one of us says, no, we don't have to go the Armageddon route. And in fact, I can envision an amazing new paradigm, and I'm seeing it. I can tell you so many things I know. Now, this is the most powerful video clip I have of this, because of course I want to share that with you. But there are many, many other amazing things going on. I'm sure if we had time, that at least half of you have some things that you could share, like, let me tell you about this. And that would be an amazing thing just to do, to hear all the inspiring things going on in the world. And I'm privileged having the websites that I do, that people send me stuff all the time. Some of you in here have already sent me things. It's like, yes, thank you. Here's more stuff to plug it in. So to kind of wrap this piece up, I want to say what we're working on right now, the nonprofit Peers. We're developing a new website that is very exciting, and it's called the Transformation Team. So it's transformationteam.net. It's not quite ready for a full launch, but you'll see the introduction to it up there if you go there now, transformationteam.net. And what it's going to be is a place that the homepage has a natural filter. I wish, does anybody have it that they can hand it to me real quick? Anybody grab it? No, I didn't put it out, sorry. But it starts out saying, do you know that every person has a heart? Do you know that every person is divine in their essence? Are you willing to look at the dark places in yourself and transform them? Are you willing to look at the dark places out in the world and work together to transform them? Do you feel that one of the main reasons you're here on the planet is to help transform to a new paradigm based on love and empowerment? So those statements are a natural filter to turn away those who aren't interested, which is what we want, and to excite those who are ready to step up fully into their power. And let's play together and let's use our synergy, our joint energy, to transform the entire consciousness of the planet. So that's what this website is going to be about. So if you resonate with that, then you'll read some introductory stuff, and then we're going to have looks like it's going to be a 20-lesson course. You'll go through 20 lessons that are going to be an exploration of both sides, both going into the dark sides, even learning some about mind control and UFOs, but also learning things like on the first lesson has this videotape in it. So it's about inspiring you and saying, hey, and then putting it into a framework, the framework that I've been sharing with you. And once you've gone through all of this, then you get into what we call the community portal. And in this community portal, for those of you who know MySpace, it's like MySpace, but way better. It's where every person gets their own homepage. You get to describe who you are, what your spiritual path is, what transformation experiences you've had, what are the big challenges in your life. And so anybody on the team, you can go look and read and learn a tremendous amount about them because they'll answer these questions. When you join, you'll get a questionnaire. And so you'll have a whole thing, and you can put up a picture of yourself or your favorite picture. But not only that, we'll have all sorts of sections for the website. For instance, those who are interested in dance, those who are interested in environmentalism, those who are interested in sacred sexuality. There will be separate sections of the website for people to meet and communicate in various forums. But not only that, one of the most exciting things through the new technology is you'll be able to go to something like a Google map and click on Ashland, Oregon, and you get to choose a radius. Let's say within 30 miles of Ashland, Oregon, you click the button and you get to see all the members of the transformation team who live within 30 miles of Ashland. Not only that, you can write an email and then send it to all of them and say, come over to my house for a potluck Friday night at 5. And so it's not just a virtual community. You travel off to New York and you want to meet some transformation people in New York. You can connect up with them there. And once we grow big enough, and we're fairly certain this is going to go big and it's going to be more than 10,000 people, you can even get specific and say, okay, I'm going to visit Columbus, Ohio, and I'm interested in dancing with some really great people. So you go Columbus, Ohio, you click dance, you click 30-mile radius, send all those people an email, I'm coming and I love dancing. Anybody want to get together with me? Take me out dancing. So it's going to be an amazing community interface, and everyone in the community will have a shared understanding not only of the deep cover-ups, so that they're willing to look at the dark side, but also of the amazing possibilities for transformation. So it's going to be really exciting, and that's what I'm just so thrilled about, and I can't wait to get done, but it takes longer than you think always. So I think I'm going to end the formal presentation there. Let's all take a deep breath. And as much as you're comfortable, I invite you to breathe in and join with me in inviting transformation into ourselves and into the whole planet. And I'm going to invite, I know a lot of you have questions, and we're not going to have time to answer all of them, unfortunately. We've got a mic because we're recording this and we want to be able to hear you. And the mic doesn't stretch all the way back, so if you're in the back and want a question, please walk up at least halfway and we'll hand you the mic. I ask you to think, does my question serve all of us? And if it's something that's more private, please see me afterwards. I'll be up here and I'll be willing to stay probably for half an hour to answer questions. But right now I'd ask the questions to be really something that would be useful to everyone in here. So let's take a deep breath again. And then I invite any questions.
Hi.
Hi. And your name, please.
My name is Andrew.
Andrew.
Besides the thing about you're hearing from a top military person that no plane could get within that range of the Pentagon and the White House and so forth, I actually didn't hear anything else that you know personally from your own experience about the cover-ups. Now, I assume that you have a lot of actually first-hand experience besides all of the things that, like I've heard of Stephen Greer and Michael Rupert. So besides all the things that are already accessible to us, I'm just wondering, what have you seen personally? And it's probably more than you can tell now. Have you recorded it somewhere that I can look
Great
and
question.
read? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. That's a very good question. For those who want to read it, I think it's about 4 pages long, and I actually wrote up all of the things that I personally experienced as an interpreter that are very strange or that reflect some sort of cover-up. And if you go to Google and just type Fred Burks interpreter or Fred Burks interpreting stories, that's an easy way to find it. That's probably if you type Fred, or just type Fred interpreting stories, and you'll get it if you don't remember my last name. One thing I've gotten very good at is getting high in search engine rankings, and we're number 1 on thousands of search engine rankings. In fact, I believe if you type Indonesian interpreter, I'm definitely in the top 3, if not number 1. It'll have my stories there. And yes, just so you know, I have not personally seen a lot of things that relate directly to 9/11 or mind control. I've seen little bits and pieces that are very important. Yet I have received tremendous amounts of incredibly reliable information where I list the sources, and if you go to wanttoknow.info, you can take the category and go look, and the sources are all listed. You can go look at the original source. There's always ways that you can verify the information. Thank you.
Would you perhaps tell
one story? Okay. Here's a fun one. I was with the top general of the Marine Corps in his official residence, meeting with the top general of the Marine Corps in Indonesia. And there were like 5 or 6 of the top generals of our Marine Corps, all the 3- and 4-star generals, at this banquet at his home. And one of the 3-star generals, this was just casual dinner conversation, but I was still interpreting even for that. And he said, I was in Indonesia and I saw their psychic special squad, psychic military squad. And it was unbelievable. He said, these people, they were putting blindfolds on them. They let me test the blindfolders and riding through obstacle courses on motorcycles. He said, not only that, they had me take a coin and go out and bury it in this grass field. And I left, came back. There's no way I could have gone back and found it myself. They got out some of their psychic warriors to go out and find it right away and bring it right back. So he had seen all of these weird, bizarre psychic training stuff. And believe it, the U.S. government has this too, but these squads are kept top secret because there's a disinformation program to make everybody believe that psychic stuff does not exist. And there's literally, disinformation means consciously putting out false information to lead you astray. And for many years now, the government has not wanted you, or not, I shouldn't say the government, it's rogue elements within the government that do not want you to believe. Rogue. Rogue Valley elements? No. And Karl Rove elements, okay. And so they have sophisticated disinformation programs to lead us astray, and that's just one bizarre thing. And by the way, the top general was General Krulak at the time, Charles Krulak, said, no, that's totally ridiculous, and was laughing. And to this day, I think he actually knew and was trying to shut that down so nobody else would believe the guy in the room, because it's only the top people that get to know this stuff. And I know Krulak is involved in some ugly stuff, so my guess is that he knew, but he was trying to shut down his own generals and said, no, don't even talk, that's ridiculous, you're nuts, And the guy's seen it with his own eyes. So that's just one example. Got a question right here, and then we'll come here. If you come up a little bit, please.
So my name is Peter. I'm trying to balance this dark side and the good side in my own personal experience, and I think what would be very helpful is to hear you talk about your visions of the future and how you see it unfolding in a positive way so that we can hold that.
Great question. Well, it's interesting because as I go deeper and deeper into my own rabbit hole spiritual path mysticism, I'm finding that time is less and less important. And I'm finding and this we'd have to have a long conversation, that the future is quite malleable, and actually so is the past. We all think the past is completely set in stone, and I'm discovering, wow, you go in and do a hypnotherapy session, and you can totally change your perception of what happens in the past. And when you change your perception, the reality somehow changes too. So if the past is changeable, how much more so the future? And so what I'm finding is that all that really matters is that I'm focused now on this amazing moment. And when I live each moment in its fullness, that's when transformation moves most powerfully forward. And I'm not at all certain that we aren't going to blow up the planet. I'm not certain of that. I'm fairly certain we won't. But I'm never 100% certain of anything, but I don't focus on that. I'm focused on what I'm calling in, what I'm envisioning is a gradual shift. And yeah, we're going to probably have some real shocks and stuff and tidal waves or whatever, but I'm looking forward to having a good time. One quick analogy that I think you'll love. You could put this current time into a metaphor that here's the planet and there's a huge tidal wave crashing down on the planet. What happens when people see that tidal wave coming, about to crash down on them? Most people freeze. It's so huge, they just freeze, paralyzed, panic. Well, no, it's just paralyzed, and it just washes them away. Other people, they take one look and say, I'm getting out of here, and they just run like crazy. But guess what? You're not going to outrun that tidal wave, and whoosh, they get swept away. Then there's the people who have some spiritual presence, some spiritual depth in their lives, and understand when things like this happen. What do? They take one big hunkin' deep breath, and when that wave hits, they dive right into it. And what happens when you dive into a wave? You pop up on the other side into a whole new world. But there's one more group. There's the transformation team. The transformation team, tidal wave. No way we can stop that. Let's get out the surfboards, guys. Come on. We're up there riding the wave and helping to create how this is going to land. And so that's my metaphor. It's like, we can have fun with this. Because if we know that every one of us is divine and that all that is God doesn't want to destroy itself, doesn't want to destroy humanity. It wants to create and find new ways of creating and exploring the dark side and the light side. For whatever reason, the divine wants to explore the dark side too. And if we can get okay with that and then just work to stop the violence, but also to support each being and being all that they can be, guess what? That's when we'll be riding those surfboards and having a great time. Other questions?
So, my name is Timothy, and as you said, you get a lot of information from a lot of different sources. And this is a question about dark side politics. And, there's obviously people who are coordinating all this stuff. And then there's the bunch of crazies that have been the neocons and Cheney and so forth. What do you hear about their standing among the people who are actually coordinating all this? I mean, they look to me like they're screwing up, but...
Yeah. Thanks for the question, Timothy. My belief from early on, for many years now, is that the neocons were set up to be the fall guys. That, as they knew eventually some stuff was going to come out, and if they can pin it all on the neocons and get everybody focused on them, how bad and evil they are, and once they take the fall, then, now we can all relax and everything is back to normal. And so I have expected all along, it's just a matter of time before, and the neocons are already going down in flames. They're not all down. As Karl Rove just resigned, and we still have a few more to go, and Cheney hasn't been impeached yet, but so I think they're nothing but fall guys. And you know but see let's take it again to the meta perspective. What I have come to believe, it is that I myself, and I would imagine most everyone in here, has some serious judgment of the dark side. And it's when we're wanting to hold and say that dark is bad and light is good, we are reinforcing the polarity. And I'm doing this too. And I'm doing my very best to catch when I'm doing it now. I love the Tao symbol. Y'all know that Tao symbol? It's a big circle, and then it has a thing like this in the middle, and there's half is white and half is black. And in the middle of the light, the white side, is a big splotch of black. And in the middle of the black is a big splotch of white. So in the deepest darkness, there is light. And in the greatest light, there is darkness. And you go into the black hole and you come out on the white side. And it's all fluid. And so when I am choosing to be in judgment of darkness, then we're supporting that and we're strengthening that. When instead I choose to say, okay, this is what's happening. People are being tortured and killed. But then we can step back and now remember, death is just a transition. Torture is something we all somehow call into our own lives sometimes, and every one of us has in some way emotionally tortured other people at some point in our lives. And I can tell you, one of the most powerful, I happen to believe in reincarnation. One of the most powerful memories that came back to me is I was the chief of a torture chamber a long time ago. And when I got that, it's like, holy, you know, before that, like a lot of people, like, oh, maybe I was some famous general, or maybe I was close to Christ, or maybe I was Christ, my arrogance, you know. And, you know, all of that was great and cute and fun to think about. But then when I got this, oh my God, this is a number of years ago, I was the chief of a torture chamber, and guess what? I was damn good. I took great pleasure when I was in that lifetime in looking people right in the eyes and, you know, just, you know, choking them or doing all sorts of things that I don't even want to talk about, to suck the energy out of them. But now I not only got that life, eventually when I first got that, like that was powerful, but then I said, well, let's go look back at what caused me to do that in that lifetime. And I saw how I was tortured by my own parents. That, you know, they were part of some dark cabal or something that in generations in my family, where particularly Dad was coming in and doing weird torture to me. So, you know, I was born in as a beautiful being. I believe we're all born in some way as beautiful beings, as babies. But then I got this conditioning from this father that turned me into this torturer. And because I tortured so many people, guess what? You know, I lived many lifetimes after this. And again, you don't have to believe in reincarnation, but that's what I believe in. And so anyway, I've had to pay back the karma, if you want to call it that. And it's one of the reasons that I think those who have done some of the most heinous things have to later stand up and do some of the greatest things. You know, and the whole thing is I have to be careful about not wanting to stand out in a way that I'm better than any one of you, but neither being afraid to stand fully in my power and say, I've been blessed with all this stuff, and I want to share it, and I want every one of you to step up and play with me. So it's a great question, and let's, you know, I encourage you, every time you're looking in judgment at anything, can you turn it back inside and saying, this is reflecting something inside of me. I'm choosing to see that negative, and that's where the real powerful transformation happens in my life.
I'm not certain if I know how to articulate this question, but I've been drawn to the dark my entire life, and I've also had a deep appreciation of how going into that transforms. And so I see this as very powerful. I also see, though, that people can become very overwhelmed with a lot of, it's like what I call information. It's almost like a bottomless pit if you start to follow it. So I had the experience of several years ago, I was in a shamanic workshop, and it was very intense. It was quite wonderful. But somebody said, during lunch, I mean, after all this stuff we were going through, and there was something going on particularly frightening at that time politically. She said, during lunch, would anybody like to join and just get in, talk about their feelings about what's going on?
Sure.
So we actually ended up in a sacred circle.
Neat.
And passed a talking stick, and everybody got to share, their feelings about what was going on. So why I'm bringing this up is I'm just really intrigued with this thing about getting more information. Is that as valuable as,
Very good.
it's like expressing the impact of what all this that is going on is having in our lives,
Right.
and expressing that in a deeply personal way.
Great
So-
question. Your name?
Thanks, Patty. That's an awesome question. So am I recommending you go on to wanttoknow.info and read all 3,000 pages? Absolutely no. And believe me, I got caught and obsessed somewhat in exploring some of this stuff, and I had to really look at this question, just what you're talking about. How much do I focus on exposing all of the negativity so that people know what's going on, and how much do I focus on this other part? And it's important. Every one of us, I think, has to find our own balance. Why did I choose to go so deeply into it? I really think it has to come with my own belief that I had this lifetime where I played so heavy on the dark side that this is kind of like a payback. For those who want or need to know, or it's useful information, they can now go in and get this information. So that's why I felt the calling to go so deep, and nobody else was doing this piece, as I said, putting it together very systematically so that you can look in any category and get a very deep level of information. By no means do I recommend that everyone does that. And yet, I do believe if you want to be a powerful force on this planet, it's good to have a basic understanding of all that is being hidden from us. Which is why I recommend, like on the transformation course, you will have the basic summaries of all of the major cover-ups in various lessons. And I think it's important so that you just have a basic picture, but you don't even need to go in and get any more than that. Just so you know what's going on, and then so that you're informed when something happens that looks like it's not what it is. I mean, how many times do you see some news and say, there's something going on here, and I don't know what it is? But I sense there is something seriously going on here. But if you have this information, you will then say, oh, there's something going on here, and my guess is it's this. I can tell you, stuff happens in the news, and I can almost say, oh, well, this is almost certainly this going on here. So by just having a basic understanding of what mind control is about and how they do that, by having a basic understanding of how the press is manipulated, and it's not simple, it's rather complex, but understanding that the ownership of the media is where the censorship happens, much more than down the ranks. That's useful, powerful information. So each of us has to go in and look, how much do I want to know? How much is it useful for me to know? And everybody, I think it's valuable to definitely have good doses of both sides. Yeah, I saw this hand here first. Yeah.
Thanks, Fred. Okay, question in two parts. Personal experience. Can you share an experience with us where you witnessed, in a place that was unexpected to you, a opening to transformation, a embracing something unforeseen that was, for your eyes, a really positive, impacting change? And second, I've heard you mention several times inviting people, standing in your power and inviting people to step up and play with you.
Right.
So for this group here, for us in the now, you've offered up your different ways to link with you through cyberspace. In the moments that come, perhaps we're going to have some tidal waves, perhaps we'll have little bumps that might shake people.
Right.
What's a specific thing that you might offer up as a way to link in with us and the larger network and family in the moment when that's happening?
Justin, right?
Yes.
Yes, thanks, Justin. Great questions. I'm going to answer the second one first. And the best way to link up, not only with me, but all the people who are deciding to step up, is this Transformation Team website. And that's why I'm so excited about it, because you'll be able to interact not only with me there, personally on that website, because I will certainly be a member and I'll be very accessible. Everyone else will be able to interact. So you can see, who do you resonate most with? But all of these people will have a similar background of having gone through that course, so that you know they've got a certain level and you know they're willing to step up. So that's a way that you can personally interface not only with me, but with this entire great new community that's forming. And as to your second question of witnessing personal transformation, I do have a really fun story. 2003, October, Bali, Indonesia. President Bush was doing a 4-hour stopover to meet with President Megawati Sukarno Putri, because Indonesia was turning quite anti-American and trying to calm some of that down. And this was the last time that I interpreted for Bush before resigning. I resigned because of excessive secrecy requirements. Long story short, I had never signed any secrecy pledge and was interpreting for the president. Long story, we won't go into it. But then they went from nothing to suddenly I had to sign something that said everything I ever saw or did I could not talk about with anyone without written permission of my supervisors. Which means even the wonderful transformative stories, like the one I'm going to share with you in a moment, I could not tell anyone without written permission of my supervisor, which is total craziness. And they tried to keep me on, but higher-ups came and said, no, everyone has to sign it, so I resigned in 2004. So Bali, Indonesia, 2003, and again, I wouldn't be able to share this story if I had stayed on. By then, I had a mailing list, and by the way, I have 2 mailing lists. If you go to wanttoknow.info, hit subscribe free, and you can get on a mailing list. It's 1 email about every 3 or 4 days, and about 1 every 2 weeks is inspirational for the Want to Know list, and the others are all deep cover-up stuff. There's also, if you go to the other websites, there's what we call the inspiration and education list, and those tend to be about half to 2/3 inspirational, and some are also about the cover-ups, because I believe it's important for everybody to know both sides. So by then I had, 600 to 800 people on our email list. We now have about 5,000. Just real quick, how many people are on the wanttoknow.info list here? Just curious. 4 or 5. Okay, great. So I sent out to my email list, look, I couldn't tell them where because that's certainly classified. I said, I'm going to be meeting in this meeting with Bush and the president of Indonesia and Condoleezza Rice and Andrew Card, and I'm going to be there this time. Will you all join me in sending powerful prayer support or intentional support for transformation, that I can hold, sort of be a channel for all of our energy to invite transformation? And so it was really wild. That not only went out to my list of like 600, 700, 800, but a lot of people shared it with their friends. So we had several thousand at least, all focused at that moment when I went in there. And it's a wonder. Can you imagine? It's a wonderful feeling. And I did this a number of times, just feeling all of that support when I walk in. And so just a couple really strange things happened. First, the interpreter's usually in place first before they walk in, because the presidents walk in. It's all this protocol and ceremony and all that sort of stuff. So I'm standing in there with a few Secret Service agents, plenty of those around, and Bush and his team walk in. And immediately they walk in, Andrew Card takes a look at me and comes beeline over to me and he says, "Hey Fred, it's great to see you again." And I had seen this guy maybe once or twice before from a distance, but never said hello to him once. And for him to walk right over and say, "Hey, it's great to have you here." I was like, whoa, what is this? I've never said hello to you. But I didn't say that, of course. I was like, wow, great, thanks, But my mind is going, that's bizarre. So that was just the first thing. Then we go in, a lot of things happened, and it was really wonderful. They met with these 4 spiritual leaders, and they had an amazing talk. A lot of great things. And there's much more to this story, but I can't tell you all of it. But I'll just tell you a couple key pieces. Part of it was a banquet, where all of the principals there, about 12 people, sit down at this long table, and we go in to sit down, and the American side is here with Bush in the center, and I'm sitting right at his elbow. Interpreters don't eat because, of course, they have to interpret during the meal. And so they come in, and Bush is the first to sit down, and almost as soon as he sat down, he looked at the table, he turned back to me, and he said, "They didn't bring you any water, did they?" You don't know how unusual this is. You do not know how unusual this is. I've worked with tons of people, and some of them are nice to their interpreters and notice things, but to actually notice at this, presidential level meeting that the interpreter was not brought water, and when there's not even a place for me at the table, it was like, wow, that's really weird. And so, I said, and interpreters need water, by the way. In fact, I could use a little water right now if anybody wants to bring me a cup. Because, we're talking so much. It's like, yeah. And so he says, waiter, please bring this guy some water. Thank you. Oh, that's great. So, that was another thing. And then about halfway through the meal, he just turns and starts talking to me. He's like, don't you get tired of interpreting and you don't get to have any lunch and anything? I said, oh, it's fine. He's actually engaging in conversation with me, and he'd never done this before. And I really do believe a part of this is because I was channeling all of this energy, and I could feel it, and other people in the room could feel it. And another strange thing that happened in that meeting, Karen Burks, who I did know fairly well, she's the chief of Asian Affairs at the National Security Council. And right in the middle of the lunch, she was seated like 3 over from Bush, and she came over, gave me this big honking 2-second kiss on my cheek, and said, I'm so glad you're here. Right in front of everybody. It's like, whoa. But then I have to also share the most transformative part of that meeting for me. There's many other things that happened, but those are just a few examples. Condoleezza Rice was there, and I found myself looking at her and sitting in judgment. What a cold, calculating woman this is. And I caught myself. I said, whoa, Fred, wait a minute. Here you are, helping to channel in all this energy about love and transformation, and you're sitting and holding this woman in judgment. And really, I could just feel it. It's like, whoa. I don't know why I didn't have it for anybody else, but for some reason that day, I just felt judgment of her. And it's like, wait a minute, stop. And I just did, take a deep breath. There's that judgment. Okay, cold and calculating. Where's yep, lots of cold calculating up in here. There is. That's a part of me. It's like, okay, I get it. And then I could just set aside, and then literally, my little practice, breathe some love with her. It's like, okay, there's her heart. Just imagine it. Breathe it into me, breathe out to her. Whew, shift. So that was the most transformative moment for me in that whole meeting. So thank you for asking. Yeah, and I've seen many, many, many transformational things. Not necessarily so much at the high level, but many, I could tell you stories upon stories of amazing transformation.
Hi, my name is Tyson, and you mentioned mind control. Can you tell us about the programs that are being used against us?
Thank you, Tyson. And I'm afraid this is going to have to be the last question because it's 9 o'clock. It's such a deep subject. And, for those who are interested, it's well worth going in and looking at. I really recommend you go to wanttoknow.info and look at, there's a whole big section on mind control. It's got links to the government documents. As far as what you can do about it, even if you don't want to go in and look at it a lot, they can only control you to the degree that you are in fear and judgment. That's the key piece. And many of my friends who are doing similar level work to me, or even sometimes not even as much as out there, I've testified in an international trial against the U.S. government and ended up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. So that's pretty much, you can read the article if you're interested. It was a very interesting article they wrote on me, this whole transformation story around that too. The reporters basically really liked me, but they were supposed to slam me, so it was cool. It's on the website. If you type, or you can just go to Google and type Fred Burks Wall Street Journal. You'll get the article. Or just Fred Wall Street Journal will bring it up too. Like I said, I'm good at search engine stuff. Right. So anyway, where I've had friends who get targeted, and I get called in when they're being targeted, and all I have to do is remind them, because my friends are mostly deep spiritual based, where are you attacking them? They can only attack you if you're attacking them. So really think about that. Yes, they have very sophisticated weapons. I can tell you stories. They have guns that shoot, and video of congressional testimony of a CIA agent talking about a gun that can shoot you from a distance, completely silent. It's a dart that goes in. It's very thin. It feels like a mosquito bite at the most. Sometimes you don't even feel it. Within 2 hours, you're dead of what looks like a heart attack. This technology is out there. They have beam weapons that can make you commit suicide. That kind of stuff is out there. It's scary stuff, and there's much more. And if you hold yourself and can get to the place where when you see the fear coming up, you learn about mind control, you start to get in fear. Like, wait a minute, I don't have to be in fear about this. It's just the divine exploring itself in some bizarre way that I don't understand. There's the great mystery. I can't tell you the whys, but it's happening. Can you accept it? And then can you send love to the hearts of those who are doing it? That's the key. When you find yourself in judgment, can you do that little exercise that I just shared with you? Your sacred love flows into me, like I did with Condoleezza Rice. And then my sacred love flows out to you, because it's always people that are behind all of this terrible technology. Connect with the people. You don't have to be in fear about the technologies. So thank you for the question, and just want to say thank you all. You can tell I love talking about this stuff. I particularly love talking about it to people who come from a spiritual base, because that's where I'm coming from. And just want to encourage you to spend some time. I've shared a lot of information, and spend some time going inside and looking, where am I holding others in judgment? How much is it right for me to go in and explore this dark stuff? I highly encourage you to do some. Don't get caught up in it. Don't get obsessed. But if you're feeling called, okay, go as deep as it feels right to you. If you're feeling overwhelmed, find some inspirational material to build you back up. We've got a whole beautiful inspiration section even on wanttoknow.info. Or go to some of the other websites. If it feels right and resonates with you, join up and come play with me on the Transformation Team. TransformationTeam.net. Got cards back there that list a few of our websites. And as I said, if you want to contact me, you can do it through the websites. Want to know that info, by the way, I'm not the one who answers there, but he'll send it to me if you send a personal message to me. So just thank you all so much. Thank you for being a reflection of myself, and have a beautiful life.
Our Vml Resource Center is a volunteer-operated federal 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofit organization. RVML is dedicated to providing easy access to a comprehensive collection of information on a variety of metaphysical, spiritual, and personal development subjects. RVML accepts and appreciates all donations. Material and monetary contributions are fully tax-deductible. This recording is not copyrighted, and permission is granted to broadcast, exhibit, or duplicate all or part of this program for non-commercial educational purposes. This live presentation was organized and presented by the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library and Event Center. For more information, please visit rvml.org.